Hey guys, this is Comic Uno, and today I'm doing Comic Uno's Best Comics of the Week, and let's get started. We go least favorite to best pick of the week, and I had a pretty large haul this week, so I will say that there's one book on here, though, that I excluded from the list, and I'm just going to talk about because I did not read the previous issues to really have a full thought on it, and that was Hell Arisen issue 3. I'm keeping in this bag and board. So I did get issue 3, which I was really happy about, so I thank my comic book store for getting me the issue. And I just really wanted to talk about the Punchline aspect of the book, because again, I didn't really follow this series. It has to do a little bit more about you're the villain and Batman Who Laughs and stuff going on with Batman and Superman, the whole Who Laughs saga, I guess. So I don't know much that's going on in this arc, but Punchline, we actually don't get to see her that much in this issue. She's only really at the end, and you get a little bit of her personality. She definitely seems like a more, has a more of a killer edge, I guess, compared to Harley. Not really a jokester, but it looks like she is in a relationship with Joker, and obviously she's going to be a big character, and that's why a lot of people are trying to get these issues in her first appearances. But I think the next issue of Batman is going to hopefully give us a little bit more information, because here, yes, it's her first official appearance, but really it's only a couple of panels. The previous issue was her real first appearance, which was Batman issue 89, which I also was able to get in issue 4, which I was very happy about. And with that, it was just her lips. Here is just like, all right, we get to see him holding hands for like the first couple of panels, or really the middle panels, and that's about it. So hopefully we get a bit more information, and hopefully she's a good character, and not just a Harley Quinn, I wouldn't say look-alike, but I guess just character-alike. And she actually has more of a personality, and not that Harley doesn't, but I just wouldn't want a copycat. So, yeah, Hell Arisen, not on the list, but I wanted to discuss it and show off that I was able to get the issue. So, putting that on the side. Now, let's actually start the list, and I read 15 books, like I said. I guess technically 16 because of Hell Arisen, but number 15 for me is Ant-Man issue 2. So, I obviously, picking up the series, I'm a huge Cassie Lang fan, but I have not been liking this arc. I really don't care about Scott fighting these insect monsters, and I really don't love Cassie in this book. I think she's written really out of character, her screaming about her dad. I did like the moment where she tells her mom, like, hey, I'm gonna join the Avengers, because that was very Cassie, and then she's like, well, it's actually Kate's Avengers, it's the West Coast Avengers, but then she, like, starts dogging on her dad again, and I don't really get why. It feels like it's coming out of left field, and it's the complete opposite of what Cassie is. You know, she literally is not the stereotypical teenager. Even if you read, like, Nick Spencer's run, that's, like, the way she's reintroduced into the Marvel Universe, saying, hey, she's not like any other kid. Also, she died and came back to life. But, yeah, I just don't really like this bratty side of Cassie. It's just, like, the complete opposite of who she is. And even though there's some humorful parts to it, and there's some inklings I still enjoy, and I like that she's Stinger, and we're getting to see her as a hero, I just feel like it's not doing it for me. And then the rest of the issue, honestly, I just couldn't really get into. I didn't really love the villains. I don't love the artwork. I think it's a bit darker than it needs to be, especially for a comedy book. So overall, I'm going to give that 2 stars. Just not really feeling it. Obviously going to pick up the rest to see where it goes, but not really feeling this series. Moving on to number 14, which is Suicide Squad issue 3. So Suicide Squad, I also really want to like this book. I love Tom Taylor. I love this creative team. I was really a big fan of Injustice, but the new characters I haven't really been able to get into, and the narrative in general, it just hasn't sucked me in as I thought it would. The artwork's really good, the action's good, but the story is just not really catching me. I think I'm going to drop the series at this point. I gave it a good 3-issue try, and nothing really has grabbed me besides, like, Harley Quinn's in the book, but the artwork also I really do like, but other than that, plot-wise, it's just not really doing it for me. And if I hear something else that I really should pick up this book again, maybe I'll catch up. But as of right now, I think I'm gonna drop this one. So Suicide Squad issue 3 gets 2.5 stars, and that is number 14. Moving on to number 13, which is Shazam, issue 11. Another book I'm debating on dropping. I really don't want to drop this book because I was really excited for a Shazam book. I love Mary. So it might take me a couple of issues to kind of decide, but these arcs have been very prolonged, and I just haven't been invested in the story as much as I wanted to. I don't really care about the villains and the major plot going on with them taking over Billy's dad, even though I thought it was an interesting twist. I don't know if I'm quite invested in it. Maybe it's because of the artwork. I haven't enjoyed that. I don't think it's as strong as it was when we first entered this book. I just feel like it should be more detailed for a Shazam action-packed series like this. But yeah, just not really my style of art, and it's taken me a lot out of the story and a lot of the character beats because you're not really feeling that through the visuals. So Shazam issue 11 for me gets 3 stars. Not a bad story. I enjoy it overall, but I don't know if it's enough for me to pick this up every month because I'm just losing excitement over this series. So we'll see how long that stays on my pull list. I will get the next issue, but I just haven't had that excitement, like I said, that I've wanted with this title. Moving on to number 12, which is a new book, and that is Amethyst issue 1. So Amethyst is Wonder Comics, and I really wanted to read this book because I saw the preview. It looked up my alley. I love teen coming-of-age stories. So also, I've tried all the other Wonder Comics titles, I believe. I think I tried all the issue ones. So why not try this one? And I honestly just felt like there wasn't anything that really stood out. Not saying it was a bad issue. I think we got her personality for the most part in this issue, and the artwork is really good. But it's just this teenage girl from another world, and that's pretty much it. I guess maybe if you follow the other Amethyst franchises and other series, maybe you'll like this more. But I'm not a high fantasy type person, and there wasn't enough character beats for me to be like, oh, I need the next issue. It just kind of was forgettable and fizzled out for me, even if the artwork was strong. But yeah, overall, there wasn't anything unique for me at this one. So Amethyst issue 1 gets 3 stars. I don't think I'm going to get the next issue for that one, but we'll see what type of week it is when that issue comes out. So moving on to the next issue, which is number 11. This is a bit higher than usual, but still not loving this series, and that is Batgirl issue 44. I mean, I'm a humongous Barbara Gordon fan, but once again, I keep saying this, I don't know if DC knows what to do with Barbara Gordon at this point, and I think that's proven with this whole, like, love fantasy arc. Even though I think there were some good character beats between Jason and Barbara in this issue, even though I'm like, Jason loves Barbara, they, like, kissed once. Like, what is going on here? And I don't really quite like their relationship or understand their relationship, but I got the beats going on, and I think there are definitely interesting moments. And honestly, what got me to the 3 stars was the cliffhanger, where we get to see, like, Barbara wants to give Jason a chance, and then, like, this woman's covered in goop, and he's like, oh man, he's not a good guy, like, what's going on? Or did he bring something back from the dragon world? So that was interesting. I was like, all right, you got me again. Like, I like the cliffhanger, but overall, I don't really care about the fantasy dragon love thing going on. I just felt a bit shoehorned in, and I'm just not a big Jason fan, so we'll see if that changes in the future, but pretty cool cliffhanger. So Batgirl issue 44 gets 3 stars, and that is number 14, I believe. That was number 11. I don't know what I'm counting in. And number 10 for me is a book that I've just heard a lot of hype for, so I picked it up, and that was Finger Guns issue 1. Again, big coming-of-age fan, so this is a coming-of-age book about a girl and a boy who uses finger guns to change people's personalities, it seems like. I honestly didn't really get, like, the full scope of it, and that's why this is a little lower. It felt like things happened really quickly. Where you're like, okay, this guy points a finger at a clock and then somehow gets these, like, powers, which I think makes people angry. And then if you use the finger guns in a different way, then other outcomes will happen. So, like, if you use 2 finger guns at once. But, yeah, I like the idea of a very unique coming-of-age story, but I don't know if I was really grabbed by this one as much as I kind of hyped it up in my mind just because I was hearing so many great things. I did like the artwork, and I think, it's cool that we do have a unique coming-of-age story, but I think it just happened so quickly that I couldn't really grab onto the characters as much as I thought I would. So I don't know if I'm going to get the next issue. We'll see, but I'm glad I gave the first issue a try, and that is Finger Guns issue 1, and that is number 10. All right, moving on to number 9, which is the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers issue 48. I absolutely love that cover. As you guys know, I'm a huge Kimberly fan and also a big Ranger Slayer fan. You can see right there. So, yeah, this issue, I thought we were going to see a bit more Kimberly, but when she shows up, man, it was a good scene. And it's interesting because I wasn't quite sure of, like, what the other Rangers remembered out of her. So that was kind of cool to see. Like, they do still remember that character and I guess things unraveling from Shattered Grid. But I loved all her lines. I thought she was badass. I loved her Zord that showed up and her rescue mission that she wants to join the Omega Rangers. But I will say the reason this is a little lower, there's a lot going on. There's a lot of different stories that are focused on. We get to see that evil Ranger, I forget her name, but... And the evil Ranger that they've been going up against, that was their teammate. And then you get to see, like, Jason and Tommy start sparring with each other and kind of discussing Jason's decision to go to the Omega Rangers. So there's a lot going on, but there's a lot of good character beats. Like, I love that Tommy and Jason moment, and I thought their conversation was really cool. But I do think the issue really picked up once we're in space and dealing with the Omega Rangers and dealing with Grace. That's when the issue really succeeded for me. And the artwork is so good and so expressive, and pretty interesting cliffhanger. It seems like the Rangers might be out for war again, and might be a lot of action, especially if we're reeling into issue 50. So I gave that one 3.5 stars. Really excited to see more Ranger Slayer, hopefully, for the future, and some really good character beats, like I said. So that was number 9, and moving on to number 8. And number 8 for me is XMen Fantastic Four, issue 2. And this probably would have been higher if it was for, I guess, a different art team. Not that I think the Dodsons is a bad art team. It's just not really my flavor, and I felt it was a little darker than, like, this cartoonier flavor that we are getting with the Dodsons. Like, the inking it's definitely a bit heavier there. But overall, I really enjoyed the story. Even though, like, in the back of my head, I'm like, how does this all connect? Is this even going to connect to the X-Men title? Because there's a lot of interesting politics between human and mutant and Fantastic Four, who are humans that have very strong abilities, and then with their son being a mutant. So I thought that was really interesting, the politics that went into it. And there's a lot of twisted turns for sure, where we get to see Dr. Doom involved, and in the end, it looks like he's got some Sentinels. So even though they're all trying to avoid war, I think war is definitely going to come for them. And there's some good action sequences with the Fantastic Four going on Krakoa. I really like that. So overall, there's a lot of good character beats, and a lot of interesting conversation about what it means to be human and what it means to be a mutant and all the politics that kind of go along with Krakoa with very popular heroes like the Fantastic Four. So I think it's a really interesting combination. I just hope that it connects into other X-Men books and maybe the Fantastic Four book. I just don't know the time period, because it's kind of hard, because Kitty Pryde's dead in one book and she's alive here, so I don't know how to feel about the out of continuity-ness of the book. So I'm giving that 3.5 stars, and that is number 8. Moving on to number 7. I'm going to take a sip of water. And number 7 for me is The Amazing Spider-Man issue 40. So a little lower than the previous 2 issues. This one's a little bit more action-oriented, where we get to see Chance and Spider-Man go up against each other during the podcast, and the podcast blows up, and this is actually a good thing for Spider-Man. He's like, oh, maybe JJ actually is on my side. And then in the end, we get to see Nora Winters maybe knows that Peter is Spider-Man, and it looks like she wants him to write, like, a book about Spider-Man, like a tell-all. Maybe not about him being Spider-Man, but just from his perspective of being Spider-Man to make money, and she's working for the Chameleon in the end. That's what's revealed. So a lot of moving parts in this issue. I will say I think it takes a while to get to those moving parts, but overall I had a good time with it. I do think the previous issues had a bit more humor in the issue, or in the story, but overall I love the idea of this story arc with the podcasting, and I think Nick Spencer does a really good job at making it very relevant and organic to talk about how we consume media and how we consume news, and comparing this to stories we've seen with Spider-Man in a fresh new light. And I think Spencer's been doing a great job with that overall, of making Spider-Man have these classic stories, but in a 2020 setting. So I've really enjoyed that aspect, and yeah, some interesting little tidbits happening here. So we'll see where that goes. Artwork, as always, is very solid, and I feel like this artist does a good job at not representing, but paralleling, I guess, the artwork of Ryan Otley, who's the usual artist for this, but didn't do this arc. So it was nice to kind of get the same style there. So I'm going to give that 3.5 stars, and that is number 7. Moving on to number 6, which is Giant Size, Jean Grey, and Emma Frost, which definitely doesn't feel giant size because there's not any dialogue in this issue. And when I was skimming through it, I was like, oh no, there's no dialogue. What's gonna happen here? And obviously it's a bit higher on my list, so I was impressed with this issue. I do think if there was dialogue, this would have been higher on my list, but I actually liked, and because it's Russell Doterman, who's one of my favorite artists and just perfects emotions and facial expressions here. I think he did such a great job at telling a story, again, without any words, and that's such a hard challenge, and sometimes with silent issues, you're like, oh, well, it was really quick, and I just spent $4, what does that mean, and, you know, how do I kind of put this in my mind in the creative space of, oh, you just told a story with no words, that's really cool, and for two telepaths, I thought that was really interesting with Jean and Emma, who, you know, have a complicated relationship. And again, that's where I kind of conflict with this issue, where I'm like, oh, it's really cool that we get to see their conflict through just their facial expressions. But at the same time, it's Emma and Jean. You want the standoff. You don't get this standoff very often. Like, I want to see them, like, talking to each other and, like, being kind of, like, I guess, bratty towards each other. So, and, you know, you love that aspect of their relationship. So that's kind of something I wished happened, but I also really like the take they took here. And overall, the story is about Storm being on the floor and something happened to her, and they go into her head and realize there's like a techno virus in her brain. And that goes to like my, I guess, overall criticism of the X-Men books is that there's so many of them, you don't know what time period everything's taking in. So Storm is perfectly fine in X-Men. She's perfectly fine in Marauders. So like, how does Giant Size in the timeline of X-Men take place in the actual X-Men series? So that's the one thing I'm like, all right, Storm really having this techno virus, or the other Giant Size issues going to deal with this? So we'll see. But overall, I thought the artwork was drop dead gorgeous for this book, and it's really interesting just to see the different personalities of Emma and Jean kind of come across the page in a very different way. So I gave that 4 stars, and that is my number 6. Moving on to number 5, which is Angel and Spike, issue 9. So I guess this is kind of a new series because they're changing its name. Even though I feel like there wasn't really a warning to it, it's just like, all right, this is a Spike series now. And I'm like, all right, cool. I just feel like some of the Buffy stuff it's happening really quickly. Like we're really only in the first year of Buffy, but they're throwing a lot at us before things could really develop. Like to know Fred and know Gunn and to understand their characters in this universe, it would be nice before throwing another character. But on the flip side, this is my number 5 for a reason. I feel like the Angel and Brian Hill does a really good job at developing these characters, and even though there's a lot going on, it's a good pacing. Like, we get to see that cop character from, I believe, like, the first season of the show. So it's kind of cool seeing her back. And I was like, looking her up. I'm like, oh yeah, I kind of forgot about her because the show had changed so much throughout the seasons. And it was cool to see a different view of her and how she's, I guess, becoming connected to the supernatural. And just, you know, Angel being Angel. Actually dealing with the Angel investigation stuff was really nice because it's been a while because of Hellmouth. And then, you know, Gunn and Fred saying, you should probably trust Spike. And then as a viewer or as an audience member, you're like, should you trust Spike? I don't know. And showing the comparisons of Angel and Spike. But then it goes back to, like, is it too soon to give a Spike a redemption arc? We don't know anything about him in this universe. And you know, the reason that Spike was such a great character was because it took a while for that development to happen. Same for Angel. So I don't know how to feel about that aspect of, like, quickening the narrative, but there were some really interesting beats here, and the artwork was really good for this book. So overall, I thought it was pretty solid, and Angel and Spike issue 9 gets 4 stars. Moving on to number 4, which is Batman Curse of the White Knight issue 7. So I've been loving this book. I really love Sean Murphy's take on Batman. It's some of the best Batman stories I've read in a really long time. It feels classic, but it's putting its own spin on it. And this issue in particular, we get to see the past of Bruce Wayne and him connecting the dots to what the Wayne family means. And understands that he has to reveal his identity to really destroy Azrael and that connection to his past. And I love the little moments he has with Alfred in the flashback. I like his moment with Barbara, where it's just 2 pages of her, like, in the hospital trying to walk again, and they have this heart-to-heart where Batman's like, do you think your dad would be okay with me doing this? Like, what do you think he would want me to do? And Barbara, like, tells him, like, I think this is what he would want. And then it kind of gets him to the decision of revealing himself to the world, which was definitely a big moment. I mean, I think we all knew it was going to happen, but it was a big moment. We have another really good moment with him and Harley, where they have a conversation where, you know, Bruce is building up to that moment. So overall, a lot of good action here, a lot of good character beats, and definitely giving us a promising narrative for an explosive finale. I believe there's only one more issue left of this one. So, solid stuff. Love the artwork, especially if you like more of the mechanics of Batman, like costumes and Batmobiles. We get a lot of that here too. And again, character beats in general is really good. So, giving that 4 stars, and that is number 4. Moving on to number 3, which is Basketful of Heads, issue 5. I think this is the penultimate issue, but yeah, this issue, or the series, has really been impressing me. And I remember with the first issue, I didn't know how to feel about it, but as the series went on, it really, I feel like, kept improving. And as someone who's a really big fan of the slasher genre and Final Girls in general, I've been really enjoying June's narrative. And in this issue, I will say it's a bit exposition-y, but I enjoyed the exposition of our villain and learning more about June's boyfriend, not really telling the truth about her, and they end up walking outside. The villain thinks that he's kind of gotten June around his finger, and then June's ready to hit him with an axe, and things don't really quite work out for her. And in the end, I love this last line where it's like, oh, why would you bring an axe to a gunfight? So the aesthetic of this comic is so good, and I love just the artwork and the tone, and yeah, it feels like a classic slasher to me, but it twists the final girl narrative and tropes that we all know and love. So I've really been enjoying this. If you're a fan of like Halloween or Scream or Friday the 13th, I think this is definitely one to pick up. It's a really good slasher. I guess even a reverse slasher in a way, because the villain's using a gun and then the final girl is kind of the slasher herself using an axe. So I think that's pretty cool. Twisting the table or turning the table. So that's number 3. And moving on to number 2, which is X-Men issue 7. Love these Gwen Stacy covers. And X-Men was really interesting. It delved into a lot of political stuff, so it might not be for everybody, but I really loved what they dived into. And you're kind of seeing a bit of a vision of how they got to the Powers of X, House of X future, where they talk about like combinations of genes and like how far does this go? Like if you keep killing people and making them perfect, what does that mean? And I think we've all learned with Krakoa that utopia is not really utopia sometimes. Perfect doesn't exist. And you have these really, you have 2 interesting characters to talk about it, which is Nightcrawler, who is, very heavy on his Christianity, and then Cyclops, who was the Boy Scout. So they have a conversation of, is the Crucible okay? So the Crucible is an event where they kill off people who were part of House of M and turn into humans again. So one of the characters, I believe her name was Megan, I vaguely remember her, but Arrow, which also is already a Marvel character or a new Marvel character, so that kind of confused me, but she ends up going through the Crucible because she wants to be a mutant again. She wants to be part of Krakoa, and I love the battle between her and Apocalypse. Man, the artwork was so good, where you just see her going down to her knees and she just won't give up. It's such a good fight, and I love Apocalypse kind of egging her on the whole time. And then she dies. She dies in the end, and like she's reborn is so culty. She's naked and she's in front of everybody. She's like, I'm a mutant, and then she starts flying, and then Nightcrawler is just like, I think I'm gonna start a mutant religion because none of this makes sense, and I need to figure out the philosophy of Krakoa. So I thought it was a really cool issue, and overall, yeah, it was a lot of fun, some good stuff here. So I'm gonna give that 4.5 stars. That is number 2. I actually was gonna give it 4, but after talking about it, I'm like, this issue is really good, so I'm giving it 4.5. All right, moving on to number 1, which is Dial H for Hero issue 12. Man, I'm going to miss this series. I absolutely love this issue, and I think even if you're not like a hardcore DC fan, I really, or I would say more, you're not a hardcore Dial H fan. I think you should really read this if you're just a DC fan or just a comic fan, because it's a love letter to DC Comics. It's a love letter to comics in general, where Miguel and Summer figure out that the answer to fixing the multiverse is hope. And we get to see that they didn't need superpowers to save the world. And it was really this story between him and Superman, where Miguel understands, like, oh, I didn't need the dial. I just needed to have hope in Superman. And I love that beginning end to the story. I think it was just so good. I loved already the Dear Superman stuff. So to really see that closing chapter wrap together, that storyline was really good. So yeah, there's also a lot of good action here too. You know, one thing we love about Dial H, this version of Dial H, is the different iterations of heroes we get to see, the different comic book mediums explored through script and Joe's artwork, which is mind-blowing in this book. Again, going back to just the styles, but also the facial expressions and the emotions shown here. And in the end, we get to see Summer and Miguel. They decide to go to Metropolis and start their new life. And it's just a really heartwarming book that reminds, I think, all of us why we love comics and that feeling we get when you read a really good comic book. So yeah, I love this issue. I thought it was really good. It was a good ending, and I hope we get to see more of these characters in the future. And if you haven't read Dial H, please pick up this book. It's one of my favorites, and from issue 1 to 12, it will blow your mind. There's so many twists and turns to it. These characters are just so good, and probably some of my new favorite characters as well. So go check out this book. I gave that 4.5 stars. I thought it was a really good ending, and yeah, that was my pick of the week. Hopefully you guys enjoyed. This is Comic Uno. Definitely go check out my Twitter and Facebook. Go check out my comics, Like Father, Like Daughter, and They Call Her Dancer. And every Tuesday at 10 p.m. Eastern Time is our comic book podcast, where we talk all things comics, including our top 5 comics and comic book news. So hopefully you guys enjoyed. This is Comic Uno. Bye.